starting now. Okay, I guess we're starting now. Let me just share the screen. Okay, so everybody can see the text, right?
Yeah, we can see.
Say shtika kehoda'a. If you're silent, it means you're agreeing. So welcome back. Today we're going to continue the Shemonah Perakim, right? The 8 chapters, Maimonides' introduction to Masechet Avot, the ethics of our fathers, of our ancestors, of the Hachamim in the Beit Din. All right. We are now in the 4th chapter. It's slightly longer. It's a bit longer than the other chapters that we've studied so far. We'll see if we can do it today. I don't know if we'll be able to complete it today. If not, we'll complete it next session. All right. So previously we were talking about the middot of man, right? And how the Hacham's job is to be like a physician of the Nefesh. All right, we already said what the Nefesh is. The Nefesh, the health of the Nefesh is measured by a person's middot, right? And same way that the middot can be, you can have bad middot. So the same way that a body can be sick, so too the Nefesh can also be sick. And same way that you can heal a body by taking proper medication and doing certain actions, so too the nefesh can be healed. All right? And whether the nefesh gets sick or heals or is healthy, right? Since the nefesh is one unit that consists of many different functions, health of the nefesh affects the entire nefesh, and sickness to the nefesh affects the entire nefesh. And so, in this chapter, we're going to deal with how to heal the nefesh, a nefesh that is sick. It says, "Hama'asim atovim," the correct, the right, the proper actions that a person does, hem hama'asim hashavim. All right, actually, I want to read for a second from a different translation. It says, Hama'asim asher hem tov, right? The actions that are good, meaning they are defined. The definition of good is these actions. Hem hama'asim hame'uzanim. These are the actions that point to some sort of equilibrium, that they're average actions. All right, hamemutzaim, they are average, they are equal. Ben shte kitzavot sheshtehen ra. Right, we said you could put all of the middot like on a spectrum, right, between two extremes. And as we said previously, the right midah, the proper way to behave, is to be equally distant from each extreme, to be as focused, as tuned to the center, to the middle as possible. Ha'ahat, so what are these two bad midot? Ha'ahat mehen tosefet. One of them is excess, it's too much. V'ashenit hisaron. And the other one is too little. V'hama'alot, right? So these are the actions, but the ma'alot, the middot that we're talking about, the virtues of man, of his nefesh, הן תכונות נפשיות וקניינים ממוצעים. Right? So the middot of a person that are balanced and equal, between equal distance from the two extremes, right? Those are the proper middot of a person. Ahat mehen yetera, right? One side is too much, is excess. והאחרת חסרה. מן התכונות האלו יתחייבו הפעולות ההן. All right, so our actions are derived from our character, from our middot, from our qualities. So by fixing our qualities, we will be fixing our actions, and so too the other way around. By fixing our actions, because we have control over our actions, then we can also fix our middot. V'hamashal bo, all right, so an example, just going back to the scale, hazehirut. Hazehirut is you have seriousness towards your life. So what is this zehirut, right? This is a zerizin makdimin misvot, right? They do the misvot on time. So what is this zehirut? Shehi midah memusad ben rov hata'ava uben ha'eder hergesh ha'hana'ah. So there's two extreme middot. One of them is someone who's always looking to fulfill his desires, his material desires, right? He likes to eat nonstop, right? Always fulfilling his desires. And the other extreme, he has no joy from any desire. Both of them are bad extremes. And if you find yourself at any extreme, any one of these two extremes, you need to correct your actions and your behavior. So hazehirut himid pe'olot hatovot. The zehirut, that is a good midah, and that is the balanced midah between those two extremes. Utchunat nefesh asher techayev. Sorry, so the zehirut is an action, right? It's a behavior. So that behavior is derived from a certain midah. So tchunat nefesh, the midah, the quality of the nefesh, asher titchayev mimena hazehirut, right, which brings this kind of behavior of zehirut, hi ma'alat midot. These are already in the category of the middot, not of the actions. Right, having excess ta'ava is one extreme, and having zero joy from call it earthly material things. You can't enjoy I don't know, you can't enjoy cake, you can't enjoy anything you eat, you can't enjoy anything you do. All this is also about huach kaseh haron. That's the other extreme. Ushnehem ra gamur. And these are both extremely bad. Ushte techunot hanefesh asher imhen yithayev rov ha'ta'ava, right? And the two qualities of the nefesh, when you get this rov ta'ava, one of them is hitechunah yetera, one of them is an excess of feeling any kind of pleasure from any earthly goods, right? One of them is having too much of it, and the other one is having too little of it. Both of them are inequities of the nefesh. And so too, being generous. That is a balanced midah, right? Being generous is balanced between being stingy, where you can't share anything that you have with anybody else. Pizur is you spread all your wealth, all your goods with everybody, and usually you end up with nothing. All right? So both of them are extreme middot, and both of them are bad. You have to balance yourself in the middle, and that is called the nedivut. When you're balanced, then you're generous, right, but not in excess, giving everything away, right? So the halakha talks about giving charity. It says aser te'aser, right? You should give like a tenth of your income to charity. It says hammarebe, right? Lo yarbe al homish, right? You shouldn't give more than a fifth, which is 20%, and you shouldn't give less than 10%. V'amamit lo yamit me'isu. V'hagevura. What is gevura? Right? Gevura is someone who's he has courage. So this courage is a midah memusat, is a balanced midah between hamesira lesakanot, somebody who takes excess risk, unnecessary risk. There's a lot of people, they like to live on the edge. They're thrill junkies, right? That is not courage. That is a bad midah. And being a coward. So these are two extremes: extreme cowardice and extreme thrill seekers, taking extra unnecessary risks upon themselves. The middle midah between them is courage. So you have fear, you have some fear, and you're aware of the dangers, and you do it anyways because that's what's required of you now. That is courage. Sinsun, let's see what this other translation is. Bidihut, all right, meaning being able to have fun, easygoing, right, is a balance between between being, extra worried about your own kabod, how do people look at you, being letting yourself being viewed as lowly, right? So you either want people to look at you as you're some sort of great, honorable person, so you can't have any fun, any good time, or you're like a clown, right? And you don't really care what people think of you. Okay, so this guy is a clown. No, you have to, be, on the one hand, easygoing, on the other hand, to have some seriousness. ופירוש סלסול מי שמתכבד כראוי ואינו נבל בדבר, right? Someone who doesn't bring any kind of like dishonor to himself, so that nobody will ever think anything wrong about him. התנשאות, and what is התנשאות? It's a kind of arrogance. שיתכבד האדם יותר מן הראוי לו והנבלה ידועה, right? So someone who tries to make himself look a lot more honorable than what he really is. Okay, so being, I call this, we call more modern Hebrew, call it lesanut, right? Being like a clown, someone who does things that are, they're improper. Things that can bring shame on a person. Nahat, ממוצעת בין הקטרוג ובין הקנטרות, being also, it's a different kind of easygoing where you're not always talking bad about people, and you're not always complaining about things. ובין הרכות הטבע, meaning you don't really care, ושוקרים בלעז מולדה, והוא מי שהוא בלא דיבור ובלא מעשה נכבדו טבעו וכל מזגו, והוא כנגד הקטרוג שיבוא מחידות טבעו וכל מזגו. Right, so some people, they're very, we'll call it, very erratic, right? They just do things without thinking, and others, they take, overthink things, right? So this is, each one of those isn't good. You need to be balanced. Va'anava, humility. Memutzaat ben ha'ga'ava is between being, how do you call it? Ga'ava, having extra pride. Uben shiflut haruach, being kind of like a nebech, who doesn't care about what people do to him at all, has like zero feeling of self-pride, right? Both of those are bad. Anava, this humility is a balanced midah between the two of them. Vehahistapkut. Histapkut is, how much are you going to work in order to make a living? What's like, how greedy are you? Ben ahavat hamamon, right? The one excess is being greedy, uben ha'asnut, and the other excess is being lazy and not having any motivation to go out and do something and better your situation. Now, since we're talking about histapkut, I'll just take on a side note. Talk one of divrei Hazal that they talk about histapkut, right? Because it's often considered like a virtue to be what they call histapek min hamu'at, right? What they say histapek min hamu'at is normally understood as to be satisfied with a little, right? Like they say, ezehu ashir Hasamech b'chenko, who is rich, he who is happy with what he has, right? V'histapkut b'mu'at, so they understand that also as histapkut b'mu'at, right? To be satisfied, sort of listapek could also mean like I'm satisfied, but we'll see that's not exactly what it means. As listapek b'mu'at, meaning even if I only get like a very, very measly paycheck, I should be happy with that. And one could also think that that means I shouldn't do anything necessarily to improve my situation. Improving my situation would be greedy, and I should be in this midah, this center balanced midah of histapkut or nistapek bamu'at. All right, so histapkut doesn't mean to be satisfied with your current situation necessarily. If your current situation isn't good, what do the Hachamim say when they say nehistapek min hamu'at? So nehistapek doesn't mean to be satisfied. It says, we say in the Haggadah, Sipek tzorchenu bamidbar 40 shana. He provided for us in the desert 40 years, right? Sipek tzorchenu bamidbar. Histapkut is to provide for ourselves. So does that mean histapkut bamu'at? He said this is the Hachamim's tip on how to get richer. Same way that they say, Ezehu ashir asamech b'chelko, who is rich, who is wealthy, he who is happy with his portion. If you have a little portion, what does that mean to be happy with it? Well, take care of it. It means take care of it, increase its value, increase its worth, even if it's a little portion. And that little portion will bring you even more value. So listapek b'mu'at is like, let's say someone is making a salary of 10,000 shekels a month. Listapek b'mu'at, they're saying, provide for yourself from the minority of that income. Listapek, listapek et hatzrachim shelcha, right? Provide for yourself from the mu'at, don't spend 8,000 shekels out of that 10,000 shekels on all your shopping and everything. Spend up to half of it if you can, right? And with the other half, use it to increase the value of what you have, either savings or investing or any way to increase that value. And the more you do that, right, then the more savings you accumulate. I'm sorry, I'm wearing my financial advisor hat now. The more savings you accumulate, right, and the more income you generate, and then the less portion, the smaller the portion of your income that you use for yourself is. So listapek b'mu'at. So it starts off maybe with like 50-50, then it grows to 55-45, and then 60-40, until you see that the rich billionaires, they only use maybe 1% of their income for themselves. And that's more than we can dream of, right? They use 1% maybe for themselves, and the rest goes to funding all sorts of institutions, goes into their investment portfolio. So that's how I understand nistapek b'mu'at. Nistapek is provide for yourself from the smaller portion of your income. As time goes on and you do that more and more, and you increase the value, right? That's also a tip for accumulating wealth, is invest in your portion as small as it is. That portion will grow, and you will be able to provide for yourself from even less of your income. All right, that was a side note. We'll get back to our class. So providing for memutzat ben ahavat mamon, that is the balanced midah between greed and always chasing after your next deal, and uben ha'asnut, and being a lazy. Vetuv lev, right, having a good heart, that is a middle midah ben hanivelav v'yitron tuv halevav. All right, so And oh, there's a side note here. This isn't actually written by Maimonides, saying that a lot of this middot, right, they're not really properly defined, and we're trying to take things from the philosophers, from the Hakamim, right? We see later on in Pirkei Avot where I don't remember who it was, which one of Hakam, Azab and Azariah. He says, what is the best midah that a person should pick for himself? And his Talmidim, they each give a different answer. And one says, Lev Tov, and he says, Ro'eh ani devarav. I think it was Rabban Yohanan asking which is the best midah. And it says, Ro'ani et divarav al divrechem. I see his opinion over yours because Lev Tov includes all the others. All right. There's savlanut. What is savlanut? It's patience, having a certain kind of patience, tolerance, we'll call it, right? That is a balanced midah ben hakas, between getting angry, right? You get irritated quickly, you get angry, and you start yelling, v'heder hargashat hirpa. And the opposite midah is you don't even feel anything when somebody disgraces you. Both of those are bad middot. You need to have tolerance, but you can't be pushed to a point where you don't feel any disgrace when someone wrongs you. Boshet panim. Boshet panim is also, it's a kind of humility. Memutza ben ha'azut. Azut we call chutzpah. That's what they call today, chutzpah. Azut ve'habaishanot, and being extremely shy. Right? So boshet panim is right in the middle. Ufirush nireni midivrei botenu zichronam livracha. And he says, I see this in the words of the Hachamim. Shabaishan hu etzlam misheyesh lo rov boshet. Boshet panim hu hamemutza. So we see that boshet or busha, shyness, is not the same as boshet panim in the language of the Hachamim, because it says lo habaishan lamed. We see this in Avot. Lo habaishan lamed. He who is shy does not learn because he's too shy to ask questions. Velo amru en boshet panim lamed. And we see they didn't say anything about boshet panim, who doesn't learn. And they use the term boshet panim. They said boshet panim the Gan Eden. He who has boshet panim, which is that a middle balanced midah, does go to heaven. But if you don't learn because you're too shy to learn, then you don't really acquire much olam haba. So that's why I put the baishan as someone who is excess shy, and boshet panim as the balanced midah between the two. וכן שאר המידות יצטרכו על כל פנים לשמות מונחים להם מהסכמה שיהיו עניינים מובנים. It says, okay, so, and so too, all these examples that I gave, they can apply to all the midot. All right? והרבה פעמים ייטו בני אדם באלו הפעולות ויחשבו אחד מהכסבות טוב ומעלה ממעלות הנפש. And we'll see many times that people, they misjudge these midot, and they will judge one of the excess, one of the extreme midot as a good midah. For instance, oh, this person is extremely humble. Says, no, he's not extremely humble. He feels nothing. That's not good. All right? Sometimes you'll see one end as the good end, כמו שיחשבו המסירה לסכנה מעלה ויקראו המוסרים עצמם לסכנות גיבורים. As they say, they look at a daredevil and say, oh, he's extremely brave. He says, no, he's not extremely brave. He has no awareness of the dangers that he's taking. He has a midah that seeks out these thrills. That's not a good midah. That doesn't make him courageous. That doesn't make him brave. That is a bad midah that many times people misperceive as a good midah. And when they see someone who is in this extreme, someone who takes on himself extra dangers. He goes out to sea when there's a storm or whatever it is. Right? And he puts himself in risky situations deliberately. So he gets put into all these dangerous, he puts himself in all these dangerous, high-risk situations that he happens to survive. Right? So they think of him, oh, wow, this guy is extremely brave. And sometimes they'll think the opposite extreme is the good extreme. And they'll misperceive somebody who has no feeling of himself, zero pride, as someone who is tolerant and patient. Says, no, he's not. He's burning up inside, and one day he may explode. This is a bad midah. You can't not feel anything. And the person who is lazy, right? As we said before, so they'll perceive a person who just stays home and doesn't do anything, doesn't try to improve his situation as someone who is just happy with what he received. Mistapek bamu'at, sameach b'chalko. Says, no, that is not the midah the Torah wants you to have. Right? So someone who doesn't have any desires at all, they say, no, he's just very nizhar, he's very, they say, he's parush, he's holy, he's a holy man. Says, and he's afraid of sin, and that's why he goes to the extreme of not enjoying anything in life. This is that too is wrong. That's a misperceived virtue. It's not a virtue. It's a bad midah. ועל זה המין מן הטעות יחשבו גם כן הפיזור ויתרון טוב הלבב מן הפעולות הטובות. And so to people who excessively give out everything they have, they'll perceive him as generous, even though generosity is the balanced midah, and this person is behaving in excess, which is a bad midah. And all this is a mistake. Who is the one who should be viewed as or should be praised is he who behaves balanced. He has his balanced middot. His behavior is balanced. He doesn't take on excess risk, doesn't seek out thrills. However, if he needs to go through a difficult or dangerous situation, he has the courage to do so. ואליו צריך לאדם שיכוון וישקול פעולותיו כולם תמיד, right? And to this balanced behavior is what man should always direct himself עד שיתמצאו, until he balances his nefesh, or each midah making up the middot of his nefesh, he should make them, bring them to the middle, balance his middot, and therefore balance his nefesh. Veda, and you should know, שאלו המעלות והפחיתויות אשר למידות לא יגיעו ולא יתיישבו בנפש, רק בכפול הפעולות הבאות מן המידות ההיא פעמים רבות ובזמן ארוך והרגילות בהן. All right? Says you should know that these ma'alot, these virtues of the nefesh, of the middot, they're not going to be ingrained. They're not going to be incorporated or part of your nefesh unless you repeat these actions over and over and over again. You need to turn them into a habit. You do an action, you do it again, you do it again. It turns into a habit. That habit turns into a midah of the nefesh, one of the qualities of your nefesh. So rak bichfol ha'peulot, you need to repeat these actions, right? Pa'amim rabot, many times, ubizman aroch, and over an extended period of time. V'aregilut bahen, and you need to accustom yourself, meaning you need to turn them into a habit. Right? And if these actions that you do are good, right, they are balanced, then what we'll acquire from repeating these actions is a virtue in the nefesh. And if they were bad actions, if they were extreme actions, right, then what we will acquire is an inequity in the nefesh, a bad midah. ומפני שאין אדם בטבעו בבחינת עניינו בעל מענה ולא בעל חיסרון. And since man is born clean, right, is an empty block of paper, he doesn't have any virtues or any inequities in his nefesh. כמו שנבאר בפרק השמיני, we'll get more into that in the 8th chapter, the last chapter of the Shemonah Perakim. However, growing up, right, your environment, you learn certain ways of behaving, you acquire certain habits from childhood, as he learns from his relatives, and the people of his city, of his country, his countrymen, right? And it could be that he happens to be in a place where he's learning good habits, or there could be places where you grow up and certain actions are in excess or in lacking, too much or too little of the proper midah. And therefore his nefesh will not be healthy. He'll have a sick nefesh, or a not perfectly healthy nefesh, which is something that's inevitable for everybody, because the environment that I'm sure any of us grew up in wasn't just of righteous hakamim, right, who knew how to guide every single action that we did. So we've all developed all sorts of different habits that maybe are unhealthy for our nefesh. So it's important to learn what are the ways to correct this and to make our nefesh healthy again. So if you happen to have an unhealthy or imperfect nefesh, right, which is probably the general rule for all of humanity, then you need to know how to cure it. You need to know the behaviors to do to bring you back to that balance, to equilibrium, to that center. כשם שהגוף שיצא משיוויו נראה על איזה צד נטע ויצא ונעמוד כנגדו בהפכו, same way that when the body gets sick, right, the doctor needs to evaluate where its sickness went and to cure it with an opposite force, right? עד שישוב אל שיוויו, until his body's balanced again. וכשישתווה, and when he reaches that equilibrium in the body, נסלק ידינו מן ההיפוך, right? We'll take away his medication. We'll make him stop doing whatever it is he was doing. Maybe he was eating too much of one thing, and so the doctor said you got to cut it out completely and eat I don't know, something else that balances, right? You're going to eat only vegetables now until you get healthy. But once you get healthy, you don't continue eating only vegetables. You go back to, I don't know, eating whatever it is, carb, whatever it is. I'm not a doctor. And then go back to a proper balanced diet, right? That will keep him in that equilibrium and not keep him going in the other direction. So too, we need to do with our middot. Right? So here's an example. שנראה אדם שהייתה לו תכונה בנפשו וחיסד בנפשו מכל טובה לרוב הכליות. You're going to see a person, right? He comes before us. We are his hacham. We are his cure of the nefesh. And he comes to us and we see that he has too little, right? He has too much kiniyut. He's too cheap and stingy, right? And that acquired him a bad midah. וזו פחיתות מפחיתויות הנפש. והפועל אשר יעשהו מפעולות הרע. And so therefore the actions that he's going to do because of this inequity in his nefesh are bad. They're not good, and they're going to make his nefesh even worse. כמו שביארנו בזה הפרק, as we already explained, וכשנצא לרפות זה החולי. And now we're coming to cure the sickness. לא נצווהו להרגיל בנדיבות, שזהו כמו שירפא מי שיגבר עליו החום בדבר הממוצע השווה, right? We're not going to instruct him to behave generously, because this midah of generosity is the balanced midah. We want to get him to generosity, but he already has a habit of being extra stingy. So what are we going to do? We're going to instruct him to be more on the opposite side, to be more pazran, to spread out, to give more than 10%, give more than 20%, give 50% of everything you have. Start practicing giving. Give as much as you can. I don't know if any of you saw that movie with Jim Carrey, Yes Man. Anybody see that movie? Jim Carrey, in that movie, he was always like no to everything, no to everything, never had fun, never went out with his friends, never experienced anything. He was sinking in depression in his house, missed his friend's engagement, his friend's wedding, everything. Until something happened and he started saying yes to everything. He made a covenant, he has to say yes to everything, which is also an excess, right? If saying no to everything was wrong, saying yes to everything is wrong for the rest of us. But for him, it's exactly what he needed. It started opening him up to everything in the world until eventually he balanced himself out. All right, so too, same thing, right? Same concept, right? If you're super stingy, you need to start practicing giving. Give as much as you can until you get accustomed to giving, and slowly you move from one extreme to the other until you reach more or less that middle midah, that balanced midah, and then you practice giving within the proper boundaries and not in excess. So if you try to cure someone by making him behave only according to the middle, to the balanced midah, that's not going to cure him. אבל צריך שנביאהו נפזר, we need to bring him to spread his money, his wealth, ויכפול מעשה הפיזור פעם אחר פעם, פעמים רבות, and he needs to do this over and over again, many times, עד שתסור מנפשו התכונה המחייבת לחיניות, until he eradicates this midah that he has that's causing him to be so cheap and stingy. ויהיה קרוב להגיע לתכונת הפיזור, and he'll get close, right, he'll get close to acquiring that midah of excess giving. ואז נסלק פעולת הפיזור, and then we're going to instruct him to stop giving away excessively, ונצווהו להתמיד על פעולות הנדיבות וישקוד עליהן. All right, and then we'll instruct him to behave generously as in the balanced middle midah, within the boundaries, right, 10 to 20%, no more, no less, right? ולא יותר ולא יחסר, no more and no less. וכן כשנראה מפזר, and so to the opposite, when we see someone who overly spreads out his stuff, gives everything away, right? That's a bad midah too. נסווה לעשות פעולות הכליות ונשנותן. Will instruct him to be cheap and stingy and to stop giving. Every time someone comes to say no, don't give. No, no, no more, that's it. Do it over and over and over again until he acquires that habit of saying, Ad kan, I'm not giving any more of my stuff away. אבל לא ישנה פה על הכליות פעמים רבות, ישנותו פה על הפיזור. However, the difference here is that we're not going to instruct him to be stingy excessively as much as we would the previous person that we tried to cure, right? By telling him to give as much of his stuff away. וזה חידוש הטוב, וזה סדר הרפואה וסודה. And this is something that you need to understand about the nefesh, right? Coming back from one extreme is easier, or depends which extreme it is more, could be more difficult than coming back from the opposite extreme. והוא ששוב האדם מן הפיזור לנדיבות יותר קל ויותר קרוב משובו מהכליות לנדיבות. Right, so someone coming from the extreme of excess giving back to generosity is much easier, and it's going to happen much quicker than someone coming to generosity from the other extreme of being super stingy. וכן, and so too, שוב נעדר הנגשת ההנאה נזהר וירא חטא יותר קל ויותר קרוב לשוב משוב בעל התאוות נזהר. And also someone who has extreme ta'avot, always looking right for his next earthly pleasure, is going to be much more difficult for him to come back to the center, to balance his middot, than somebody who doesn't feel anything, and now you're introducing him to these earthly pleasures, right? And trying to bring him into the balanced midah. ולזה נכפול בעל התאוות פעולות היעדר ההנאה יותר משנכפול על נעדר הרגשות פעולות התאווה. And so when we're coming to cure someone who doesn't feel any pleasure from earthly things, we're not going to make him practice more and more and more feeling pleasure than we are going to prevent the person who's always searching for his next pleasure, is someone who has tons of ta'ava, to abstain from it. And so too, ונחייב על רך הלבב מסירת עצמו לסכנות, and so to someone who is coward, right? We're going to make him practice taking risk and putting himself in, well, maybe what he perceives as danger more in order to cure him than someone who always takes extra risk upon himself and telling him to calm down. ונרגיל הנבל ביתרון טוב הנבב, יותר משנרגיל מי שיש לו יתרון נבב יותר בנבלה, וזהו סוד. Says this is a secret of curing the nefesh. So that if what middot v'zochreu. So what is the sod? Well, the Chachamim say, they have this clown. Says, Adam karov etzel asmo. Man is close to himself. Meaning, man generally, naturally, he has his inclination towards himself, towards his selfishness, towards his inclinations, his evil inclinations. That man has a yetzer atov and the yetzer hara, right? And what is the yetzer hara? The yetzer hara, I don't even like calling it yetzer hara. I just call it animal yetzer. All right, man evolved from the animals. We behave like animals. If we have no intellect, we behave like animals. That's just the way we are. And so, searching for food and enjoying life, it's a lot more natural to man. It says yeser lev ha'adam ra min ne'urav. Right? Man's inclination is evil from childhood. Why? Because the yeser hatov, man's intellect only kicks in on his bar mitzvah. Only once man can develop his intellectual maturity, which comes later on in life. But man's default from birth is to be like an animal. So we are naturally more inclined to that extreme than to, we'll say, the intellectual extreme. So when coming to cure someone from a midah that's, we'll say, more associated with the yetzer hara, right? Like kaas, right? Anger, or like ta'ava, always looking for the next pleasure, or greed, and all these things that Adam karov esel asmo. In order to cure him from that, it requires a lot more work, a lot more effort, and therefore he need to repeat the actions that bring him back the balance or to the other extreme more often than trying to cure someone from the other extreme. ולזה העניין, לא היו החסידים מניחים תכונות נפשם תכונה הממוצעת בשווה. And because of this, because man naturally is inclined more towards one extreme than the other, then the Hasidim, they would also, what is a Hasid? A Hasid isn't someone who does exactly according to the law, but he goes to say, Lifni Mishurat Adin, he takes on, let's say, an extra, a strict stringency upon himself. Why? Because everybody, by being man, is a little bit more inclined to one extreme. Everybody has their own, let's say, their own midah that they're more inclined towards themselves. So the Hasidim, right, they would make themselves, they would incline slightly beyond the perfect middle midah towards being, a little bit more patient, a little bit more not getting angry. Anger is bad, so I'm gonna put myself in the excess. I'm gonna maybe be a little bit more generous than what's absolutely middle and required in order to keep myself away from being greedy. They would do this as like a boundary, a safekeeping, to keep them away from going in the other direction, which is a lot easier to fall down. רצוני לומר על דרך המשל שהיו נוטים מן הזהירות לצד היעדר הרגש ההנאה מעט. Right, so for example, they go from the zehirut, right, from being cautious with I don't know, with your food intake, not going to satisfy all of my needs, my desires. So they'll lean a little bit more towards be a little bit, take on themselves extra, like humrot and kashrut and things like that. Umina gevura, and from gevura, from bravery, letzad mesirut hanefesh b'sakanot me'at, they would maybe incline a little bit more towards taking on risk, because man's natural inclination is to be scared and a coward of any kind of danger. ומטובה לבב לצד יתרון טובה לבב מעט, ומן הענווה, and also from humility לצד שפלות הרוח, towards feeling less pride. They would also go there a little bit. וכן בשאר העניינים, and so too with all the middot. Different Hasidim, based on how they knew themselves, their own personal inclinations, would maybe go a little bit more lifni mishurat adin, right? They would lean a little bit more to, let's call it more altruistic extreme, just a little bit from the perfect middle equilibrium. Any questions so far?
I had a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to know if there's how you can measure the if the generosity is moderated or balanced. Because if I take an example of Moshe, he was like the most humble person ever to be alive, and he was taking it more on the other side, right? It was not like the basic. He took it to another level. So
Right.
I think that was a good thing. But so when do you know that it's too much, and when do you know like it's balanced to be generous and to be humble?
So we'll see a little bit later on. I don't think we're going to get to that today. Right, we'll start off with that next week. However, it is a piece that we've already quoted a few times in our previous classes, and also I'll just answer briefly. It says the mitzvot of the Torah are there to guide us, to keep us in that equilibrium. So if the Torah says that the proper amount of charity to give is between 10 to 20%, if that's what you're giving, then you're in that equilibrium. Now, it could be that it's very difficult for you, and you can only give, I don't know, 2%. That's all you want to give. I mean, difficult emotionally. Let's say because you have no money. Difficult emotionally, you have this problem. It's my money, I work hard for it, I'm not giving it to anybody. Right? Then you go to the Hacham and he says, look, you have to give 10 to 20%, right? He'll instruct you to give 70%, 60%. I don't know. I'm exaggerating, right? It says give, do that again, 1 month after another, until he's already okay with giving charity. And then he'll instruct him, okay, go back to the guidelines of the Torah, 10 to 20%, no more, no less. Maybe you'll start giving 15%, right in the middle.
Oh, that's very clear. That's very clear. And also another question I had about Shomen Negia. Is that according to Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or is it something like people do that are Hasidim to do an extra mitzvot or take it to another?
That is according to halacha. Again, there was an evolution there in halacha too. It didn't used to exist, but over time, talking about biblical times already, right? It developed. And Yehud too, Yehud the Pnuya also developed. But these are guidelines that the Chachamim gave us.
Okay,
So
thank you so much.
as it stands now, it's settled law, it is halacha.
Okay, thank you so much.
Another question. Oh, I'm sorry. I realized I didn't raise my
Yes,
hand.
please.
So Lena has. I can go after.
You can ask, and I will ask after you.
Please go ahead. Is it Holly? First?
My question was off of Romana's question, with Shomer Negia, because I've like been in a lot of like work settings and like modern Orthodox settings, and sometimes men will like shake hands and then sometimes they won't. And so if they put out their hand, like I shake their hand, but like I don't like
Right, so
literally go to shake their hand,
if there are
only
any
when
more
I
questions
do that.
along these lines, I just want to come out and say, I don't think I'm qualified to answer these questions. They're probably better directed towards rabbi and whoever teaches halakha, right? Let's try to keep the questions on the topic that we're studying. That's what I'm qualified to answer. Sorry, I couldn't give you.
Tamar is a good person to ask those questions to.
Yeah, sorry.
Rav Kielstein and Tamar is a good person to ask those kinds of questions to.
Okay. There you
I
go.
just wanted to just that's it.
And Olena, you wanted to ask something?
Yes, I have a question about
when about extremes of, I think, gvura or chesed gvura, probably as an example. For example, it's a couple and a man is too easily getting angry, and the woman it's too forgiving, like two extremes, yeah, right? And they are together. Is it possible for them to train, and how they can get to the balance if they are both in extremes? So what actions should be done to develop new habit? If you know it.
It would be the same, in my opinion. First of all, them being two extremes may already, over time, kind of bring them each towards each other, but not necessarily. Each one needs to work on themselves. So the husband who's more angry will have more work to do in making himself calmer naturally over time than the woman who is more calmer and eats the insults that she hears from her husband and so ma'avir midotav, what they say. But she'll also have to practice standing up for herself more and voicing her opinion. All right. I don't want to give any obviously specific consult here now. I don't know what's the situation and what those consequences could be, but these are something you need to speak to a hacham, speak to a rabbi, some or speak to a marriage counselor. If there's if you're familiar with someone in this situation, you can tell them that.
But in general,
Sorry?
What actions should be done to balance a gvura? Do you know, for a few at least?
Oh, what action should be done to balance? Okay, so someone who is more passive needs to speak up more. That's an action. To voice their opinion. When something bothers them, to say something about it. Right? And someone who is angry, the actions he needs to do is take a hike, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the lesson.
There's one more paragraph I'd like to finish here. Does anybody have a question before we continue?
Rob, can I please ask what book
Yes.
you use?
Yes, please.
Can I please know what book you use? So I want to read more about what you teaching.
Sure. This is Maimonides' Introduction to Pirkei Avot, also called the 8 chapters. Shemonah Perakim.
Introduction for Pirkei Avot, Rob?
Yes, Maimonides' Introduction to Pirkei Avot. I'm sure there's plenty of translations to English you can find.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Pleasure. אבל, however, מה שעשו אותם החסידים בקצת הזמנים, we're going back to the Hasidim, right? You see that some places, sometimes, קצת מקומות, וקצת אנשים מהם, גם כן, מנטות אחר הקצה האחד, some of them went to one extreme, בצום, fasting, וקום בלילות, and they'd wake up, they'd sleep only like 3 hours at night, and keep themselves awake the rest of the night, and they deprive themselves of meat and wine. Who could imagine? Staying away from women, and wearing uncomfortable clothes, and they live in the mountains and in the caves, and go out to the wilderness and live in the deserts on their own. לא עשו דבר מזה אלא על דרך הרפואות. They only did these things as a medicine, as a means to cure some midah that they had, that they wanted to cure, כמו שזכרנו. ולהפסד אנשי המדינה גם כן. There could be another reason that they did this. The environment that they were in was a toxic environment. The city was corrupt, the people were corrupt, and they had to leave in order to preserve or correct their nefesh. They see that as they spend more time with them, they become more corrupt themselves, and they see that they're adopting their actions or their bad actions, their bad habits, right, to the point where they're afraid that they're going to corrupt their nefesh completely. So they ran away to the wilderness to stay away from toxic people, into a place where there are no evil people. As the prophet Jeremiah says, right? Who gonna give me, pour out this hostel, this hotel in the middle of the desert, right? A place where I can live completely secluded from all the people who are doing bad, because they're all adulterers, aseret bogdim. However, what happened was, after that, the Kesinim, the ignorant people, they saw these Hasidim, they saw them behaving in this bizarre manner, this extremely strict way of life, without understanding their intention. They said, well, these are Hasidim, these are holy people. What they're doing must be good, must be right. They said, let's do that too, to be like them. We'll be good people like them by going out and living in a cave. And they would torture their bodies, right? Maybe bring pain on their bodies, they deprive themselves of sleep. And they think that they are acquiring some sort of virtue in their nefesh. And this is the way, the pathway to coming closer to God. As if God hates flesh, hates the body, and wants it destroyed. And they didn't understand that these things that the Hasidim were doing were extreme measures that they were taking. The actions themselves are bad, and they did it only as a cure. And through these middot that they do, because they're not living in the same circumstances as those Hasidim that lived maybe 100 years ago in a corrupt environment. They're living in a good environment, but now they're imitating someone who's taking medication. And these actions will bring them inequities in their nefesh, bad middot. The only thing you can compare these people to are the people who are ignorant in medicine. They say, so they see these great doctors prescribing these horrible medicines to people, right? Because, I don't know, maybe they prescribed chemotherapy to someone who is sick with cancer, and they see, oh, wow, this person got cured, right? All right, and these people were cured. Right? They were on their deathbed, and the doctors prescribed these horrible medicines to them, and they were cured. And then this moron comes along, this ignoramus, and he says, says, well, if these medicines can cure a man from sickness, from death, so, well, if they can cure someone dying, well, definitely, surely, they can make me, who is healthy, even stronger and even healthier. And he started taking these medications and to behave and assume these habits of and the medications of these sick people. he will surely get sick. כן הם חולי הנפשות, אלו בלא ספק. So too are these people who look at these Hasidim who were living under extreme circumstances and took on extreme measures to cure themselves. And now these people who are living in a good environment and aren't sick are imitating those extreme measures in order to make themselves even better. So what they're going to inevitably do is destroy and corrupt their nefesh and completely ruin whatever it is that they already have. And I think we'll stop here and we'll continue from here next week. Any questions before we finish? All right. Okay, excellent.